Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I want to go over how to complete our first graphing assignment. So these are, like I said, a really important part of the class. I think math is the language of economics, and so we're going to do some math pictures. This is looking at budget constraints and production possibilities frontiers, which we learned about in chapter 2, talking about choice in a world of scarcity, this idea of trade-offs, how to deal with wanting more than we can afford. And so using a budget constraint to graph that, which is a really cool way to look at consumer choice on the micro side, how people decide to deal with how their scarce resources like money and time. But in macro, we use it all the time too, especially when we model things like trade. It can be really important for showing the gains from trade and that kind of thing. So this is our first time graphing, so I'm going to try to go very slowly. I'm going to do it on paper instead of on the board. Sometimes I'll do things on the board. It's a little easier for me, but I think it's nice for you to see how I manage this assignment on the paper. The assignment is posted. It's this same piece of paper here is posted on Canvas. You do not need to print it out and complete it. You can if you want, or you can read the instructions off the paper and write it on a scratch paper, graph paper, lined paper, or whatever works for you, or a digital assignment. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to complete this assignment, and I'll try to go fairly slowly and really give an intro into graphing in case you don't have as much experience in that. So, in order to use my document camera, I'm going to have to turn this camera off so you'll hear my voice and you'll see my hands, and we'll get this going. Give me one sec. All right, let's get started here. So because these are all being submitted on Canvas, it's not important to write your name on it because I'll see your name because it'll be submitted to your account. But the whole idea of these, like I said, is to give you an opportunity to really practice this in the real world, even though the rest of the class is all online. And so one of the big ideas from the chapter on scarcity is this idea of budget constraints and production possibilities frontiers. And these are really kind of the same thing in terms of what we're graphing. We're graphing something in XY space. So that means that we're going to have an X-axis and a Y-axis. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab a little scratch paper here and give you a quick example of what I mean. So we want to remember that when we graph things, we have the Y-axis up here, Y up to the sky, and the X-axis down here. And we'll use this a lot in economics. Usually the X determines the Y. In markets, forces of demand and supply, we'll see that we put quantity here and price up here. When we get into aggregate supply and aggregate demand, we'll use the same thing, but we'll be talking about national productivity and the price level over here. When we talk about labor and financial markets, we'll be talking about things like quantity of workers and wages. But for our purposes, with a budget constraint, our X and Y axis is going to be more about the things we're trying to decide between. So with a production possibilities frontier, we're usually talking about deciding between producing two different things. And then with a budget constraint, we're trying to decide between consuming two different things based on a budget. And that's the example that we're going to go over because I thought that would be a really nice, simple way that's really relatable. And so we have our person here, Jenna, who has a weekly budget of $24. So that's her constraint. That's the maximum amount of money she can spend on candy. And we have two things she can buy, gummies and chocolates. And remember, in economic models, we will often oversimplify things. So in this example, we're simplifying the vast, universe of things that you could consume into just two goods so that we can fit it into that XY space and graph it in a really simple way. So we've got the budget, we've got the two things, and now we need to know what the prices of them are because that will tell us how much we can consume. The price of a gummy is $6 and the price of chocolates is $4. And then we want to go through and these steps are going to kind of help us build that budget constraint. And so the first thing we ask is, what is the maximum number of gummies that she can buy in a week? And the idea here is that she has $24 in a week and gummies cost $6. So out of a $24 budget, where the price of gummies is $6, how many bundles of gummies can she buy? Well, 24 divided by 6 means that if she buys 4 gummies, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 gummies at $6 each, that will give her a total quantity of gummies equal to 4. She will have spent all her money on gummies, but the maximum she can buy is 4 gummies. So you can write Q equals 4, or you can write a sentence if that's more comfortable to you. Jenna can buy 4 gummies if that's all she buys. So far, so good. Hopefully that's kind of straightforward and not too complicated. The next question does the same thing. It says, hey, what's the maximum number of chocolates she can buy in a week? And again, we have that same budget of $24, but now we have a different price. The price of chocolates, and I'm just going to write CH because I don't want to run out of space, is $4. So if she has $24, how many $4 chocolates can she buy? Well, now we go again. 24 divided by 4 gives us a quantity of chocolates equal to 6. So again, you can just write that out, or you can say that Jenna can buy 6 chocolates. Oops. I'm just doing a great job of writing here. So far, so good. All right, 2 down, 2 to go. Now we want to write out Jenna's budget constraint using QC as a placeholder for the quantity of chocolates and QG as a placeholder for the quantity of gummies. And when we draw the budget constraint with chocolates on the x-axis and gummies on the y-axis, we want to graph the point she would consume if she spent half her budget on gummies and half her budget on chocolates. And I'm going through this and finding typos, so the version that's online is going to be a little bit more polished and a little bit more straightforward, but let's get into how we would graph this. It's going to be up to you how precise you want to be. I have students who love having a ruler and even other resources to try and make their graphs as nice as possible. I do a lot of graphing, so I'm pretty confident. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw my y-axis and my x-axis here. Now with a budget constraint, it doesn't always matter what goes on which axis, but in my directions I have here that chocolate is on the y and gummies are on the x. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll put chocolate as my label on my y-axis and gummies as my label on my x-axis. The next thing I want to do is I want to figure out how much of each I can consume. And we saw this in the slides, we saw this in the textbook and the lecture notes. But the idea is that if she's trying to decide how much to consume between gummies and chocolates, she can consume that maximum of 4 gummies, but that's $24. She won't have any money for chocolates. If she buys 6 chocolates, that'll cost $24 too, and there won't be any money for gummies. The next part here asks what would happen if she spent half her budget on gummies and half on chocolates. Well, let's figure that out. If we spend, I'll go ahead back to my scratch paper, if we buy 2 gummies, and gummies cost $6 each, that's going to be a total cost of $12. That's half our budget. That means that out of our $24 budget, we've now spent $12 and we have $12 left to spend. If we take those $12 and turn around and spend them on chocolates, our price of chocolates back up at the top is $4. So I can go ahead and take that $12 and divide it by that price of chocolates, 4, and that's going to give me, let's see, do everything nice and clearly here, 12 divided by 4. I can buy, or rather Jenna can buy, 3 chocolates. So if she gets 2 gummies and 3 chocolates, she'll spend $12 on gummies and $12 on chocolates. Do you see that? And it works out that it's also the halfway point between these two extremes. So there's a lot of ways to graph these budget constraints and production possibilities frontiers, but really one of the easiest ways is to find our 2 endpoints and say, wow, okay, the maximum amount of gummies that she can buy is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, because 4 gummies cost $24. And the maximum amount of chocolates she can buy if she only buys chocolates is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those end up being our 2 endpoints. And so we can just find those 2 endpoints and then draw our budget constraint, or we can go ahead and start filling in other points, like what happens if, I'll fill in some kind of bonus points here, if we only buy 1 thing of gummies. Well, 1 thing of gummies, that's going to cost us $6, and 24 minus $6 leaves $18 left. $18 to spend on chocolates is going to be 18 divided by the price of chocolates. That's going to mean we could buy 4.5 chocolates. What if we only bought 1 thing of chocolates? Well, 1 thing of chocolates costs $4. 24 minus $4 for 1 thing of chocolates leaves $20 for gummies. If I divide those $20 by 6, I get 3 1/3 gummies. So these aren't even distributions of our goods, right? We can't in the real world buy 4.5 chocolates or 3 1/3 gummies, but these are other points on this budget constraint. And so we can fill in as many points as we want to try and help us make sense of this, or we can just go ahead and get our 2 endpoints and the point we're interested in where she spends half her budget on gummies and have her budget on chocolates. And that's going to be right here with 2 gummies and 3 chocolates. Right there. So that is our very first graph. And it wasn't too painful, right? All of our graphs are going to be generally like this, in some kind of XY space and with some kind of lines, usually based on points. The next graph I'm going to ask you to do is going to also have this kind of stuff, but instead we're going to, I'll give you a little preview here, we're going to be looking at the market forces of supply and demand. And so we're going to have a lot more points to graph, and it's still going to be an XY space, but now we're going to be looking at quantities and prices. So that's just a little preview of our next graph. Let me know what questions you have. Hopefully this makes sense. For this assignment, to get the points, what I'm going to be looking for is a good PPF down here with this point we're interested in, and then the answers to these 2 questions just to help you build the model later on. This part I'm going to take out because that's nonsense and it doesn't make any sense and it's just going to waste your time. But I'll just try to clarify this and post the clean version of this for you on Canvas so you can take a look at it, and please let me know what you think. So that is the first graphing problem. Hopefully it was super straightforward and simple. If you've done graphs before, it should have been a nice little review. If you haven't, hopefully it was a gentle introduction. And so next up is going to be graphing supply and demand as we move through chapter 3 and look at sort of the basic model of economics, supply and demand, which we're going to use a lot, even though this is macro. Also make sure you check out your quizzes at the end of your chapters and that discussion thread, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.